Welcome, dear listener. Find a comfortable spot, perhaps beneath a soft blanket, and allow your breathing to slow as we embark on a gentle journey far back in time. Tonight, we drift into the ancient world of Mesopotamia, cradle of cities where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers wound through fertile plains, nurturing the earliest sparks of civilization. Imagine yourself settling in, your eyes growing heavy, as we explore why you wouldn't last a day in this dusty, methodical realm and much more beyond. Let the words wash over you like a quiet river, current carrying you toward restful sleep. We begin now softly with the rhythms of ordinary lives. Why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine yourself stirring awake in the dim pre-dawn light. The air already thick and warm within the walls of a modest mud brick house, tucked along a narrow alley in the city of Uruk. The roof above you is flat and low, crafted from woven reeds layered with packed clay. As you shift on your reed mat, you're only betting the faint crackle of the material echoes softly in the quiet outside. First hints of daylight filter through a small doorway covered by a hanging mat of palm fronds, and the distant lowing of cattle mingles with the murmur of neighbors beginning their day. You rise slowly, your body unaccustomed to the hard-packed earth floor beneath your feet, cool at first but soon to warm under the relentless sun. The house itself is simple, a cluster of rooms around a central courtyard no larger than a modern living room. Its walls sun-baked to a uniform ochre hue, cracked spider web across the surfaces from seasons of heat and occasional floods, patched hastily with fresh mud that still carries the faint, loamy scent of the river bank. You step into the courtyard where a small clay hearth sits in one corner, its ashes from last night's fire scattered like gray dust. The air here is smoky, laced with the lingering aroma of barley. Flatbread baked the evening before, nutty and earthy, but now cold and stale. Flies buzz lazily around a covered clay pot holding the remnants of yesterday's meal. A thin stew of lentils and onions flavored with herbs gathered from the canal edges. To prepare for the day, you must first fetch water. The communal well lies just beyond the alley, a deep shaft lined with baked bricks to prevent collapse, its rope worn smooth from countless hands. As you lower the leather bucket, the water that rises is murky, tasting faintly of the silt it carries from the Euphrates, dusty and mineral-rich. Nothing like the clear flow from a tap. You drink sparingly, knowing it must last for washing, cooking, and quenching thirst through the long hours ahead. Back in the courtyard, you splash a handful over your face, the coolness a brief respite before the humidity clings once more. Breakfast is a hurried affair, if it can be called that. You take a handful of dates from a woven basket, sweet and chewy, their skin sticky with natural sugars, and a piece of the flatbread, dipping it into a small bowl of sesame oil if the household has any to spare. Most days, it's plain, washed down with warm barley beer poured from a large clay jar. This beer is the lifeblood of the day, weak and fizzy from fermentation. Gritty with floating husks of grain, it hydrates where water alone might sicken. But its warmth and slight sourness settle heavily in your stomach. Imagine yourself sipping it, slowly, the bubbles tickling your throat as the family around you perhaps espouse children. Elders moves in quiet coordination, each knowing their role in the rhythm of survival. Now, the alley calls. You step out into the narrow street, barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing shoulders. The ground is uneven clay, baked hard and cracked in places, with open sewage channels running along the side, shallow ditches carrying waste from households. Toward the river, the smell is constant, a mix of human effluent, animal dung, and the damp rot of discarded reeds. Though the breeze from the Euphrates sometimes carries it away, flies swarm in clouds, landing on your skin with persistent buzzes, drawn to the sweat already beating on your forehead. The walls of neighboring houses press close, their doorways hung with faded textiles, and voices echo softly, a woman calling to a child, man haggling over a bundle of onions. The city awakens fully now, around 3000 BCE in this bustling hub of Uruk. Towers of mud brick homes rise 2 or 3 stories in places, ladders leaning against upper levels where families store goods or sleep in the cooler evenings. You trudge along, your simple linen kilt or wrap chafing against your skin, coarse fabric woven from flax, undyed and rough. Sandals of woven palm leaves protect your feet somewhat, but the hot clay streets burn through them quickly. The sun climbs, unforgiving even in the early hours, turning the air shimmering and dry despite the river's proximity. Your destination depends on your lot in this hierarchical world, but for most like you, imagine as an ordinary laborer, it's the fields or workshops beyond the city gates. Imagine yourself joining a group of workers, perhaps 20 or 30 strong, overseen by a foreman with a clay tablet and stylus. The gates of her loom ahead. Massive wooden doors reinforced with copper bands, guarded by soldiers in leather caps and kilts, spears at their sides. As you pass through, the fertile plain opens before you, irrigation canals crisscrossing the landscape like veins, carrying water from the Euphrates to fields of barley and emmer wheat. The earth here is rich alluvial soil, dark and sticky when wet, but now cracked from the heat. In the fields, the work begins with the rhythm of their lives, a constant, unyielding cadence. You bend to the task of weeding, your hands plunging into the soil, pulling at stubborn roots that cling like debts. The sun beats down, sweat mixing with dust to form a muddy paste on your skin. Thirst comes quickly, relieved only by sips of that warm barley beer from shared clay cups. Hours pass in this monotony, hoeing the earth with copper-bladed tools that dull quickly, carrying baskets of harvested leeks or garlic to the canal's edge for washing. The water in the canals is sluggish, alive with insects skimming the surface, and fish darting in the shadows. Birds wheel overhead, their cries a distant accompaniment to the grunts of effort. If not the fields, perhaps the workshop claims you a brick-making yard near the river. Here, gangs of laborers mix mud from the banks with straw chopped fine, kneading it with feet and hands until it forms a thick paste. The scent is overwhelming, wet earth, decaying vegetation. The sharp tang of urine used sometimes to strengthen the mix. You mold the clay into rectangular forms, pressing them into wooden frames, then lay them out in endless rows to bake under the sun. Flies descend in swarms, and the heat radiates from the ground, making each movement a labor. Imagine yourself there, arms aching from the repetitive press and lift, the clay caking under your nails, cracking as it dries on your skin. Throughout the day, scribes shadow the work, minor officials with shaved heads and fringed kilts, carrying tablets etched with cuneiform wedges. Everything is counted, the number of bricks produced, the baskets of grain harvested, the reeds bundled for roofing. They tally your output against quotas set by the temple or palace. Their stylus is scratching softly on clay. A shortfall means reduced rations, perhaps a beating with a stick for idleness. That presses like the sun itself. Many laborers owe barley or silver to the temple for seed, tools, or taxes. Imagine the quiet anxiety as a scribe approaches, reading aloud your name and tally, the numbers dictating your evening meal. Meals break the day briefly, eaten in the shade of a palm grove or under a makeshift awning of reeds. Lunch is more flat bread, perhaps with cheese from goat's milk if available, soft and tangy, curdled in clay pots or onions raw and pungent. Dates provide sweetness, their pits spat into the dust. Conversation is sparse, voices low to conserve energy, topics circling the weather, the river's level, the latest temple festival. Hunger lingers always, a constant companion. Portions are measured precisely by the overseers to prevent waste. The social hierarchy enforces itself in subtle ways. You nod deferentially to passing priests in white linen robes, their heads oiled and gleaming, or to merchants with donkeys, laden with lapis lazuli from afar. Infractions are feared, stepping on a sacred boundary, failing to yield the path, or speaking out of turn. Punishments are swift to fine and barley, public shaming, or worse. Assignment to the most grueling canal-digging crews. Women work alongside men in many tasks, spinning wool with drop spindles, As they walk or brewing beer in household vats, the yeasty smell wafting through the air. Children toddle nearby, learning early by carrying small loads or herding goats. As the afternoon drags, the heat peaks, mirages dancing over the fields. Body protests, muscles sore from bending, skin blistered where the sun finds exposed patches. Lips cracked from the dry wind. Hydration comes from the beer or canal water, but illness lurks, diarrhea from tainted sources, fevers from the swamps. Disease sweeps periodically, lives cut short without warning. Bodies wrapped in mats and buried in simple pits with a pot or two for the afterlife. Evening approaches at last, the sun dipping toward the horizon in a haze of dust. You trudge back through the gates, the city now alive with the clatter of returning workers. Streets filled with the aroma of cooking fires, garlic sizzling in fat, bread baking on clay domes. In your home, the family gathers. You grind grain on a stone quern, the rhythmic push-pull a meditative task. Flour dusting the air like fine mist, the sound is steady, comforting in its repetition, the scrape of stone on stone. The after hour of the household is large. Dinner is the fullest meal, to thicken with barley. Perhaps fish from the river grilled over coals. Seasoned with coriander or cumin if the stores allow. You eat from shared bowls, fingers scooping the warm mixture. The flavors earthy and satisfying, yet never abundant. Barley beer flows again, loosening tongues slightly as stories of the day are shared in hushed tones. Night falls swiftly. You climb to the roof if the air is cooler. Lying on mats under a canopy of stars brilliant in the clear sky, the city quiets, save for the bark of dogs, the cry of a baby, the distant chant from a temple. Sleep comes fitfully on the hard surface, dreams interspersed with the buzz of mosquitoes. Dead worries linger, taxes due to the temple in silver or labor, the cycle beginning anew with dawn. This is the rhythm of their lives, a constant struggle against heat, hunger, and oversight. Imagine yourself there, day after day, the monotony grinding like the quern stone. Modern comforts, a soft bed, clean water, leisure seem distant luxuries. The body adapts, perhaps, but for you, transplanted from now, one day would exhaust the spirit. Yet in this endurance, cities rose, writing began, empires dreamed, and so, as the details of this ordinary day fade into the evening's hush, we transition gently to the story of one who rose far above such routines, a man whose ambitions reshaped the land. Let your breathing deepen now, slow and even, as the dusty streets of her dissolve behind your eyelids. We drift forward in time, not far, perhaps only a century or two, yet into a different layer of the same world. Canals still gleam under the same merciless sun, the barley still ripples in the breeze. But a new name is beginning to be whispered along the rivers, Sargon. Imagine the sound of it carried on. The warm wind spoken softly at first, then with growing weight like a clay tablet pressed again and again into wet clay until the mark is permanent. He began in quiet obscurity, or so the stories later claimed. Picture a young man in the city of Kish sometime around 2300 BCE. Moving through the crowded palace corridors with a bronze cup in hand. The air there is cooler than in the alleys, scented faintly with cedar resin imported from the mountains, and the sharp tang of fermented date wine. Sargon, then still known by his birth name, perhaps Sherakin, true king, a name that must have felt like a private joke, serves as a cupbearer to Baba, king of Kish. His tunic is finer than a laborer's, his head shaved clean in the fashion of palace servants. His eyes watchful, he pours with steady hands, listening. Kings speak freely when wine flows, and cupbearers stand close enough to hear the tremor in a voice, the hesitation before an order. Baba is uneasy. Dreams trouble him, dreams of a young woman drowning him in a river of blood, dreams interpreted by priestess warnings. And there is something about the cupbearer's gaze, calm yet unreadable, that lingers in the king's mind like a splinter. One night, perhaps, the king orders the young man sent away on a minor errand to the city of Uruk, a journey that should end quietly. Instead, the errand becomes the first step on a longer road. Imagine Sargon traveling south along the Euphrates by reed boat. the water lapping gently against the bundled stalks. The oarsmen singing in low voices to keep rhythm. He carries sealed tablets. Routine matters of tribute, but his mind is already turning. In Uruk he meets Lagash, the ambitious king who has recently united many of the southern cities under his rule. Lagash is confident, almost careless with power. He receives the visitor from Kish without suspicion over shared bowls of warm beer. Plans are spoken that were never meant to reach Uruk's ears. We cannot know the exact moment ambition crystallized, only that it did. Sargon returns not to execution, but to opportunity. Uruk's fears grow. Rumors spread of disloyal servants. One morning the king awakens to find the palace unusually quiet. Guards who once answered him now look to the former cupbearer. Standing calmly at the foot of the throne, there is no great battle in the streets of Kish. Only a shift as gentle and irreversible as silt settling in a canal. Uruk is removed, taken across the river. The records say, destination unstated. Sargon places the conical crown upon his own head. Now feel the pace of yours begin to move, steady and unhurried, like the seasons themselves. Sargon does not rest. City by city, he extends his reach. Imagine him at the head of an army not vast by later standards. Perhaps a few thousand men in leather helmets and bronze-tipped spears marching south along raised causeways between flooded fields. The soldiers carry wicker shields faced with oxhide, their feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. When they reach a walled city, Lagash, Uruk itself, the siege is methodical, earth ramps slowly piled against the mud brick walls, loosing arrows in measured volleys, the thud of bronze axes against wooden gates. One by one the cities fall, not in thunderous charges, but in the quiet wearing down of resistance. He is careful to honor the gods, at least outwardly. Captured standards are laid before the temple of Enlil and Nippur, the religious heart of the land. Priests there, guardians of cosmic order, receive gifts of lapis lazuli and silver. In return they grant the new king legitimacy. Sargon names his daughter Enheduanna as high priestess, the first known author in history, whose hymns to Inanna will echo for centuries. Imagine her voice, calm and precise, rising in the lamplit sanctuary while outside the world shifts under her father's steady conquests. By Middle Age, Sargon rules from the Persian Gulf to the upper reaches of the Tigris, the world's first true empire. Though the word itself will not exist for another 1,000 years, he builds a new capital, Agade. Its location now lost beneath later silt, but once gleaming with storehouses and quays. Caravans of donkeys arrive from the east bearing tin and carnelian. Ships of Meg and Oman unload copper ingots. Scribes and his servers develop a new dialect of Akkadian alongside the older Sumerian, pressing fresh wedges into clay to record taxes, troop movements, offerings. Everything is counted, everything written. Yet even at the height, the string shows. Rebellions flare constantly like brush fires in dry grass. City governors chafe under central authority. Old Sumerian families remember when their kings answered to no one. Sargon campaigns year after year, his beard now streaked with gray, his bronze armor heavier on aging shoulders. In one late inscription he complains quietly, almost warily, that the gods have granted him no rest. In my old age all lands revolt against me, and they continually surround me. Drought comes as well, slow and relentless. The rivers run low, irrigation canals crack in the heat. Harvests shrink, granaries empty, and the beer grows thinner. People begin to mutter that the king has offended the gods, that the mandate of rule is slipping from his hands like dry earth. Sargon issues edicts, sends troops, offers more lavish sacrifices, lambs and bulls led bleeding up ziggurat ramps, but the sky remains brass. We do not know exactly how he died. The stories grow vague here, as stories do when witnesses prefer silence. One text hints at assassination, another at illness. Third simply says he went to his fate. Imagine the palace at Agade in those final months, corridors quieter than before. Courtiers speaking in lowered voices, the scent of medicinal herbs mingling with incense. The king lies on a bed of inlaid cedar, physicians murmuring over clay tablets of symptoms and omens outside. The empire he stitched together with bronze and clay tablets already begins to fray at the edges. His sons will try to hold it. Remish, crushed by rebellion, Manishtushu, murdered by his own courtiers, Naram Sin, grandson who briefly burns brighter than them all, but the center will not hold forever. Within 2 centuries, Agade itself will be abandoned, its walls crumbling back into the anonymous soil. And yet something endures, the idea of one king over many cities. Written records that outlast memory, but daughters' hymns still read millennia later. These are Sargon's quiet legacies, pressed into clay like the first wedge of a cuneiform sign. Let the image of that aging king fade now, gently as the lamplight in a palace chamber dims. We turn from the ambitions of rulers to something older and more mysterious still. Great step towers that watched over all these human dramas, silent and immense beneath the same unchanging stars. The enigma of the ziggurats more than temples. Let the palace corridors of Agade dissolve into darkness now, as softly as dust settling on an unread tablet. Breathe in slowly, breathe out, and feel the ground beneath you shift. We are moving upward very gently, towards something far older than any king. Something that watched Sargon rise and watched his city vanish. Imagine the night air cooling your skin as you stand at the edge of a vast open plain, rivers glinting faintly under moonlight, and the air rising in terraces against the stars. Is the great ziggurat of Ur the best preserved ghost of them all? Dozens like it once stood in every major city from Eridu in the south to Sippar in the north. Picture it as the people of 2100 BCE saw it, not the broken stump we know from photographs, but complete, dazzling, immense. The lowest platform alone is larger than a football field, built of millions of mud bricks, each one the length of a man's forearm and stamped with the name of the king who ordered it. The bricks are laid without mortar in perfect courses, bound instead with woven reed mats and thick layers of bitumen black terry, smelling faintly of petroleum even after thousands of years. The outer face is clad in the skin of fired bricks, reddish brown and hard as stone, set in gleaming white gypsum plaster that catches the sun like fresh snow on a mountain. 7 terraces step upward, each smaller than the one below, shrinking toward the sky. Willow and tamarisk trees grow on the upper levels, their roots anchored in planted soil, carried up basket by basket, so that from the plain the whole structure looks like a verdant, man-made hill reaching toward the gods. Narrow staircases climb the southern face, 3 flights converging into one steep final ascent. Imagine placing your bare feet on those baked bricks at noon. The heat would sear the soles, forcing priests to wrap their feet in cloth or hurry upward before the sun reached its height. Stand with me now at the base, very quietly. The air here is different still, heavy with the scent of cedar smoke drifting from offering fires. Around you, the sacred precinct spreads, storehouses bulging with barley and dates, scribes' houses where clay tablets are stacked like cordwood, courtyards where sheep and goats wait in pens, their soft bleating the only sound breaking the hush. The ordinary city lies beyond a high wall, but here inside the Temenos everything belongs to the moon god Nana and his divine household. One quite knows what happened at the very top, the summit shrine, the Gig Parku in Sumerian. House of the beloved bed has vanished entirely. Wind and rain and later brick robbers have stripped it away, leaving only the solid core of the highest terrace. Was there a small temple of glazed blue brick, its doorposts inlaid with copper that flashed green in the sun? Did the high priestess sleep there on certain nights, enacting a sacred marriage with the god while the city below held its breath? The hymns speak of it, but the walls themselves are silent. What we do know is how they were built. Feel the rhythm of that labor now, slow and endless. Gangs of men, sometimes thousands, worked in rotating shifts for years, even decades. They dug clay from pits beside the river, mixed it with water and chopped straw until it reached the consistency of thick porridge, then pressed it into wooden molds. Each brick was carried on the head or shoulder to the growing platform, laid in place, and tamped down by bare feet. Between every 7 courses came a layer of reed matting soaked in bitumen to keep moisture from rising and crumbling the core. When the rains came rare but fierce, the half-finished terraces turned into slippery lakes of mud. Work paused while the sun dried everything solid again. Archaeologists argued gently in the evenings over warm beer. The ziggurats simply temples raised high so the god could descend more easily. Or were they models of the primeval mountain, where heaven and earth first touched? Some say they were astronomical observatories, the flat tops, perfect for watching the moon's path across the sky since Nana's movements dictated the calendar. Others point to the drainage system's weeping holes carefully placed so that no rainwater lingered, and suggest the whole structure was a giant machine for keeping the god's house pure. Still others whisper that the emptiness inside was deliberate. The ziggurat itself was the god's, body solid and eternal, with no need for cluttered rooms. Walk with me now, slowly up the great southern stairway. The steps are shallow but wide, designed for processions rather than hurried feet. Halfway up, pause and look back. The city spreads beneath you like a map. The dense grid of mud brick houses, the glint of canals, the tiny figures of people moving along raised paths between the fields. From this height, the noise of daily life fades to a murmur and the wind moves freely, carrying the faint smell of incense upward. On festival nights, torches would line these stairs, hundreds of them, their flames trembling in the breeze while priests in fish-scale robes chanted in the ancient tongue. At the top, if we could stand where no modern foot has stood for 4,000 years, the air would be cooler, the sky enormous, the shrine, perhaps no larger than a modest house, would face east toward the rising moon. Inside, a bed of inlaid wood draped in fine linen, a table for offerings, a lamp that never went out. On certain nights, the king himself climbed these stairs, barefoot and humbled, to beg the god for rain, for victory, for another year of life. The rest of the year, the high priestess tended the divine household alone, her days measured by the slow swing of the heavens. Let your mind drift now among the lost rituals. Imagine the New Year festival. The statue of Nana carried down the ramps on a boat-shaped litter, proud, silent as it passed. The scent of roasted barley and juniper smoke thick in the air. Imagine the lamentation priests on the middle terrace, beating their breasts in measured rhythm while reciting the destruction of cities long ago, reminding everyone how thin the line is between order and chaos. Imagine the quiet mornings when only a single flute player stood at the summit, sending a thin thread of sound across the waking plain. The ziggurats outlasted the languages spoken at their feet. Sumerian faded, Akkadian rose and fell, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, Greek. Each new empire climbed the same cracked stairs to leave their own inscriptions. Yet the cores remained, baked hard by the sun, too massive to destroy completely. Even when the shrines were gone and the trees died and the bitumen blackened, the terraces still caught the moonlight exactly as they were meant to. Feel the stillness now, the immense quiet weight of these structures that were never quite explained. They stand outside the rush of conquest and ambition, patient as the rivers that laid down the silt beneath them. Let the wind move across the empty platforms. Let the stars whirl overhead exactly as they did when priests in linen robes watched the same sky and tried in their slow and careful way to touch something eternal. And now, very gently, let the moonlit terraces fade behind us. We descend one last staircase, our feet making no sound on the warm brick, and step instead into lamplit corridors where music drifts like incense, where the same rivers that watered the fields now carry the scent of roses and roasted lamb toward gilded halls. Inside the palaces of Mesopotamian kings, let the great ziggurat shrink behind us now, until it is only a dark silhouette against the first pale hint of dawn. The wind that moved across its empty summit settles, and in its place comes a softer breeze, carrying the scent of watered gardens, warm bread, and faint out smoke. We are no longer on the windswept terraces of the gods, but deep inside the palace quarter of a city, perhaps Mari on the upper Euphrates, or in its later glory, or even forgotten Agade in its brief, brilliant hour. The transition is gentle. One moment the sky is vast and star-filled, the next, high mud brick walls rise around us, painted white and pale rose. Their surfaces cool to the touch even in summer. Imagine stepping through a cedar door bound with bronze bands, its hinges singing a low, familiar note each time it swings. The corridor beyond is dim and cool, lit only by the occasional clay lamp set in a wall niche, its flame trembling behind a pierced pottery shade. The floor beneath your bare feet is not the cracked clay of an ordinary house, but smooth gypsum plaster swept daily until it gleams like moonlit water. Along the walls run long painted friezes, lions in yellow and red, date palms in emerald green, processions of servants bearing gifts so finely drawn that you can almost hear the soft clink of their bronze vessels. The air here is different from the city outside. No open sewage channels, no buzzing flies. Instead, there is the quiet splash of a fountain in a courtyard garden, the rustle of pomegranate leaves, the faint sweetness of roses trained along lattice screens. Somewhere a harpist is already practicing, the notes rising and falling like slow breathing. You walk without hurry, no one runs in a palace unless summoned by crisis. Come deeper. The central courtyard opens before us, larger than any private house could claim, its floor inlaid with bitumen and white limestone in careful patterns. In the middle stands a shallow pool lined with blue glazed tiles, an extravagance that required kilns kept burning for months. Goldfish, or perhaps the local carp kept for beauty, drift beneath lotus leaves imported from the southern marshes. Round the pool, low benches of polished diorite invite lingering. The surface is cool even at midday. Courtiers sit here in small groups, speaking softly, their linen robes so fine they seem woven from mist. The king's apartments lie beyond another cedar door, guarded not by spear-carrying soldiers, those stand outside the palace walls, but by quiet eunuchs in long fringed robes, their eyes lowered in permanent deference. Inside, the light is golden, filtered through alabaster window screens carved into delicate latticework. The scent is richer now, myrrh burning in a bronze censer, cedar paneling. The faint animal warmth of lion skin spread across the floor. The throne itself is simple by later standards, a high-backed chair of cedar inlaid with ivory, and lapis lazuli raised on a low platform so that petitioners must look slightly upward. Yet every detail speaks of calculated distance. The king is here, but not quite of the same world as those who approach. Imagine a banquet on an ordinary evening, ordinary for the palace, that is. Long, low tables of cedar are carried in by silent servants and arranged in a U-shape around the courtyard pool. Musicians settle in one corner, a lyre player, a drummer with a small clay instrument shaped like an hourglass, a woman with silver cymbals no larger than teacups. The music begins, slow and hypnotic, the same for descending notes repeated with tiny variations like water dripping into still water. The food arrives in waves, each dish presented first to the king for approval. First, warm flatbread still puffed from the oven, accompanied by soft cheese mixed with wild thyme. Then bowls of lamb, stew enriched with barley and coriander seeds, the fat glistening gold on the surface. Roasted pigeons follow, their skins crisp and fragrant with sumac. Lentils cooked slowly with garlic and pomegranate seeds. Grilled fish from the river brushed with sesame oil. And the luxury everyone waits for, honey poured from a spouted jar the color of dark amber, thick enough to coat the fingers. Dates arrive in woven baskets lined with fresh palm leaves, some stuffed with pistachios from the northern hills. The beer is stronger here than in the alleys, cooled in wet clay jars, suspended in the fountain and served in cups of polished stone or imported silver. Conversation is quiet, almost murmured. A sudden loud laugh would be as shocking as a thunderclap. Courtiers speak of the river's height, of omens seen in the moon's halo last night, of a new shipment of lapis lazuli that arrived with fewer stones than promised. Queen sits at the king's right, her hair dressed with gold pins shaped like rosettes, her linen gown dyed a deep indigo that only royalty may wear. She says little, but when she lifts her cup, the room stills for a moment. Her influence is felt rather than announced. Beyond the banquet hall lie the private gardens, walled and secret. Here the air is heavy with night-blooming jasmine and the damp breath of irrigation channels. Hidden beneath the paths, small shrines stand at intersections, a niche for Inanna with fresh roses at her feet, a stone lion for Ishtar of Arbela, a simple clay cone for the household protective spirits. The king walks here sometimes in the cool of evening, barefoot on the soft grass, speaking quietly with his chief astrologer about the coming conjunction of Jupiter and Mars. Yet even here, in this perfumed quiet, tension hums beneath the surface like a drum too low to hear. Every smile is measured. Every gift of a finer cup or an extra portion of honey carries meaning. A courtier who stands too close to the king one week may find himself sent as governor to a distant, rebellious province the next. Palace scribe records everything: who sat where, which musician played best, which servant spilled a drop of the king's beer. Those tablets will be baked and stored in numbered jars, silent witnesses long after the people named on them are dust. The women of the palace move through their own quieter corridors. Queen Mother still holds apartments larger than many temples, her advice sought on marriages and alliances. Princesses learn harp and cuneiform side by side, their laughter muffled behind latticed windows. Concubines in the harem garden embroider linen with tiny rosettes while eunuchs stand guard, the air sweet with the scent of henna and cooling water trickled over clay. At night the palace settles into a hush broken only by the soft padding of watchmen and the occasional cry of a peacock kept for its beauty in the gardens. Lamps are lowered to a glow. The king retires behind heavy curtains woven with scenes of lion hunts, his bed raised on lion feet of carved ivory. Somewhere a child of the royal nursery coughs once, then is quiet. The moon moves across the courtyard pool, turning the water to molten silver. This is the other side of the same world we walked earlier. The same sun that blistered laborers' backs now gilds palace walls. The same barley that barely filled a worker's bowl becomes honeyed cakes here. Both worlds rested on the bent backs of the many and the careful, accounting of the few. Both were fragile, though only one knew it. Let the music fade now, the lamps dim to embers. The scent of jasmine lingers a moment longer, then drifts away on the night breeze that moves across the rooftops toward the open plain. Palace walls grow lower, the painted corridors dissolve. We find ourselves once more beneath the wide Mesopotamian sky, ready to walk quieter paths still. Let the palace lamps fade to a soft ember glow behind us now, until even the scent of jasmine is carried away on a cooler current of air. Breathe slowly. Feel the stillness of the deep night settle over the city. The gates have long been closed. The watchmen on the walls lean on their spears and doze, and the only sound is the gentle lapping of the Euphrates against its mud banks. Yet even at this hour, far beyond the walls, there are roads that never truly sleep. Imagine yourself walking barefoot along one of those roads, the dust still holding the day's warmth beneath your soles. It is the time just before dawn, when the sky is the color of watered milk and the stars are beginning to pale. The road itself is little more than twin ruts worn deep by generations of donkey hooves and wagon wheels winding northward from toward the Cedar Mountains, or eastward across the plain, toward the Lapis Hills of distant Badakhshan. It smells of dry earth, animal musk, and the faint, metallic tang of the loads the donkeys carry. Listen, from a distance comes the soft, rhythmic tink-tink of bells, tiny bronze ones tied around the necks of the lead animals, so the caravan can find its way even in moonless dark. Then the creak of rawhide straps, the muffled thud of padded feet, the occasional low grunt of a donkey protesting its burden. Caravan appears slowly out of the haze, 30, 40 beasts in a patient line, their breath steaming faintly in the cool air. Each carries two panniers woven from palm fiber and goat hair, lashed tight with rope that has been knotted and re-knotted 100 times. The men who walk beside them move with the unhurried gait of people who measure life in months, not days. Their robes are travel-stained, the hems darkened with dust that will never quite wash out. Long staffs rest across their shoulders, leather water bottles swing at their hips. Sloshing softly, one man, the caravan master, carries a clay tablet sealed in a leather pouch to contract. The list of goods, the names of merchants waiting in Dilmun or Eshnunna or far-off Meluha, he hums under his breath. Wordless tune that keeps the rhythm of the march. Feel the weight of what they carry. Some panniers bulge with ingots of copper from the mines of Mig and heavy, dull red, still smelling faintly of the furnace smoke that shaped them. Others hold blocks of tin from the high eastern valley's rarer, lighter, wrapped carefully in straw to keep the brittle metal from cracking. Vast sacks of sesame seed, jars of dark sesame oil sealed with clay stoppers, bundles of dyed wool the color of pomegranates and the sky at noon, and tucked among the everyday goods, small leather pouches that clink softly lapis lazuli, the deep blue of evening, chipped from mountains no Mesopotamian has ever seen. The journey has taken months already and will take months more. They have crossed deserts where the wind erases footprints within minutes, forded rivers in spring flood, slept under thorn trees while jackals circled just beyond the firelight. At each city gate they paid tolls and silver rings weighed on tiny balance scales, argued quietly with custom scribes, drank warm beer in courtyard inns where the beds were only reed mats, overpacked earth. The donkeys know the route better than the men. They plod onward without urging, ears flicking at the eternal flies. Imagine stopping at noon beside a canal far from any town. The caravan forms a loose circle. Donkeys unloaded and hobbled, panniers stacked in neat rows. A small fire of dry dung is kindled, and flatbread is baked quickly on a clay griddle. The men eat in silence, squatting in the thin shade of a tamarisk tree, chewing dates softened in water. One of them pours a little beer onto the ground first, an offering to the road spirits, who might otherwise tangle the way. Then the march resumes, the sun climbing, the dust rising in slow clouds that settle on eyelashes and lips. Night they camp beside ancient tales, the low mounds of long-dead cities. The wind moves softly through broken walls. Someone tells a quiet story of a caravan lost years ago, swallowed by a sandstorm that turned day to night. The others listen without comment, tightening the ropes one last time, lying down in their cloaks with the donkeys standing guard around them like patient statues. These roads were the quiet arteries of the world. Along them moved the materials that made kings rich and temples beautiful. Dea, copper that became axes and plows, the tin that hardened it into bronze, the lapis that powdered the eyes of goddesses carved in alabaster. Scribes in city storehouses waited anxiously for their rival. Palace women waited for the new colors of wool. Bronze smiths waited for the smoke of their forges to rise again. Yet the men who walked the roads asked only for safe passage, a little barley beer, and the faint jingle of silver shekels paid at journey's end. Let the slow rhythm of their steps carry you now, mile after dusty mile, until the caravan itself fades into heat, haze, and silence. The road remains, patient beneath the moon, ready for the next line of donkeys when the stars will round again. As the last bell sound dies away, we turn from the open roads to something that began its own quiet journey in a scribe's courtyard, the birth of writing itself. Those first deliberate marks pressed into wet clay that would outlast every caravan and every king. Let the caravan bells fade into the warm night air, until the only sound is the soft hush of wind moving across the plain. The road is empty now. The dust has settled. Feel yourself drifting, weightless, into a small courtyard somewhere in Uruk around 3400 BCE, long before Sargon, before ziggurats rose high, before even the first kings wore crowns of gold. The moon is nearly full, washing everything in silver, the high mud brick walls, the low bench beneath a single date palm, the quiet figure seated there with a lump of wet clay on his knees. He is not a priest, not a king, not yet even a scribe in the way we imagine one. He is simply a man whose job it is to remember how many jars of oil, how many bundles of reeds, how many sheep passed through the temple gate today. Memory is no longer enough. The city has grown too large, the storehouses too full, the debts too tangled. So tonight, and for many nights before this one, he has been experimenting. Watch him now, very gently. The clay in his hands is river silt mixed to the consistency of soft dough, smooth and cool. He pinches off a piece the size of a small loaf and presses it flat on a reed mat. Then he takes a short length of reed cut diagonally, its end sharp like a bird's beak, and begins to press it into the surface. Each press leaves a wedge-shaped mark, deep at one end and tapering to nothing. He works slowly, deliberately, the way a sleeper turns over in a dream. First he makes a circle with a cross inside, the sign for sheep. Then he presses the stylus 10 times in a careful row, 10 wedges for 10 sheep. Beside that, a different sign, a jar with a pointed base and a little triangle on top oil. Again he counts with wedges. The clay accepts every mark without complaint, cool and patient beneath his fingers. When he is finished, he smooths the back with the heel of his hand, presses a thumbprint into one corner, his seal. The seals of stone will come later, and sets the tablet in the moonlight to stiffen. Round him the courtyard is quiet. A clay lamp burns low on the bench, its flame barely moving. Somewhere a baby cries once and is hushed. The palm fronds overhead rustle like soft breathing. He does not know it yet, but he has just taken the first deliberate step into recorded history. Feel time move forward now, slow as honey dripping from a jar. Within a few generations, the wedges grow more confident, the signs more numerous. Pictures become ideas. The sheep sign now means not only the animal, but wool, meat, the goddess who protects flocks. Foot means to walk, to stand, to carry. A star can mean God, heaven, or simply night. The tablets grow larger, then smaller again, some no bigger than a matchbox, meant to be held in the palm. Scribes sit cross-legged in shaded porticos, their reed styluses scratching softly. They are smelling of wet clay and the faint sweetness of the date wine. They sip to keep their throats from drying. By 2900 BC, the temple of Inanna in Uruk has entire rooms filled with these tablets. Tens of thousands of them stacked on wooden shelves like bricks of knowledge. Walk through those rooms in your mind, cool, dim, smelling of earth and old smoke. The tablets are cool to the touch. Their surface is covered in neat columns of wedges that look almost like bird tracks across mud. One records how many liters of barley beer were issued to female weavers on the 3rd day of the month of the great festival. Another lists the names of men who failed to report for canal digging duty, and the fine they now owe in silver. A third is a letter from a merchant in distant Dillman complaining that the copper he received was of poor quality and asking for a refund. The sound of the scriptorium is a gentle one, the soft tap-tap-tap of stylus on clay. The occasional murmur as an older scribe corrects a student's sign. Rustle of a tablet being turned over to write on the back. Students, boys mostly, their heads shaved except for a single lock at the nape, copy the same lists over and over. Barley, bread, beer, oil, wool, fish, dates, copper, tin, lapis lazuli. Their fingers cramp, their backs ache, but the lists must be perfect. One wrong wedge and a family might receive half rations for a month. Yet something beautiful is also happening in the quiet between tallies. Poets begin to press stories into clay. A scribe in the time of Enmerkar, king of Uruk, writes of a quarrel between two lords, one who hoards grain, one who hoards cattle, and how the goddess Inanna settles the matter. Another records the first known author's name, Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon, her hymns to the moon god flowing in long, measured lines that still feel like music when read aloud for 1,000 years later. Writing changes time itself. Before, a debt lived only as long as the memory of two men. Now it lives in clay, baked hard in the sun or accidentally fired when the building burns, surviving even when the men are dust. A king can send orders to a city 2 weeks' march away and expect them obeyed to the letter. A father can leave instructions for his children after death. A priestess can speak to the goddess in words that will not fade. Imagine holding one of those early tablets in your palm tonight, small, heavy, cool. Covered in tiny precise wedges, it weighs almost nothing and everything. It is a receipt for 30 sheep delivered to the temple kitchen in the year that the great flood came. It is a love song scratched hastily on a broken piece of pottery. It is a school exercise in which a boy wrote "I will not be lazy" 100 times, because his teacher caught him daydreaming. Let the soft scratching of reed on clay become the sound of your own breathing now. In and out, each wedge a heartbeat, each tablet a quiet promise that something of this night, this life, this long ago world will be remembered. And when the last tablet is set aside to dry, when the lamp flame gutters low and the courtyard falls silent once more, we move gently onward, toward the great storehouses, where all those carefully counted goods were kept, and where the weight of obligation pressed as heavily as grain itself. Temples, taxes, and the weight of obligation let the faint scratching of the stylus fade now, until the only sound is the slow creak of a heavy wooden door swinging inward on leather hinges. The air changes, cooler, drier, thick with the dusty sweetness of barley and the faint, leady scent of sesame oil stored in tall clay jars. We have stepped into one of the great temple storehouses, perhaps the inner precinct in Uruk, or the house of Nana in Ur, where the wealth of the gods was measured, weighed, and recorded with the same patient care that a mother uses when portioning food for her children. Imagine the space around you, a long, narrow hall with a high ceiling supported by palm trunk columns wrapped in woven reed matting. Light enters only through small square openings near the roof, so the air itself seems golden and slow-moving like honey. Along both walls rise stacks of sealed storage jars taller than a man, their mouths stopped with clay caps impressed with the temple seal, a crouching lion, or a spread-winged eagle, or simply the name of the reigning goddess pressed deep while the clay was still wet. Walk slowly. Your bare feet make no sound on the packed earth floor, swept smooth every morning by silent workers. The jars are arranged in perfect rows, each labeled with a small clay tag hanging from the neck by flax twine. The tags are miniature masterpieces, tiny wedges pressed into wet clay recording the contents, the year, the name of the overseer who received the delivery. One reads, 720 silo of fine emmer wheat, harvest of the month of the barley cutting, from the fields of the governor of Umma. Another, 42 jars of fish oil, strong smelling, received from the fishermen of the lower canal. The numbers are enormous, yet the writing is calm, almost meditative. In the center of the hall stands a low platform of baked brick. Here the weighing takes place. A large balance scale of cedar and bronze weights, its pans hanging motionless. Beside it, a set of stone weights shaped like sleeping ducks or reclining lions, each incised with its exact measure. 1 mina, half a mina, 5 shekels, 1 shekel. The scribe who works here sits cross-legged on a reed mat, a damp tablet on his knee, ready to record every grain that passes from field to storehouse to kitchen. Feel the weight of obligation in this quiet place. Nothing enters or leaves without being counted twice. The farmer who brings his barley tax is met at the gate by 2 officials, one to inspect the grain for stones or chaff, another to measure it into woven baskets of standard size. He watches anxiously as the baskets are emptied into the jars, knowing that if the total falls short he will owe the difference in labor 10 days digging canals, perhaps, or weaving reed mats until his fingers bleed. The temple is generous when the harvest is good, issuing extra rations of beer and dates, but it never forgets a debt. Women move through the side corridors carrying smaller baskets, weavers delivering finished cloth, brewers bringing samples of new beer for the steward to taste. Their footsteps are soft, their voices low. A child trails behind one of them, carrying a tiny basket of onions as his first contribution to the god's house. The steward nods approval, presses a tiny clay token into the child's hand, a promise of bread tomorrow, and the moment passes as quietly as a breath. At certain times of year, the storehouse doors are open wide and the surplus is distributed. Imagine the slow, orderly lines forming before dawn, families standing in the cool shadows, each holding a clay tablet stamped with their ration entitlement. The distribution is calm, almost ceremonial. Foreman calls a name, the person steps forward, receives a measured basket of barley, a small jar of oil, a handful of dates. No one pushes, no one raises a voice. The gods are watching and the scribes are writing. Yet there is another side to this abundance. In years when the river runs low and the canals dry to cracked mud, these same storehouses become the city's only hope. The doors stay closed longer. The rations grow smaller. People wait in the same orderly lines, but now their faces are thinner, their eyes watchful. The temple still feeds the priests and the king's table. First, the gods must be honored, but eventually even the palace feels the pinch. Tablets from those lean years record careful fractions, half a sila per day for a grown man, a third for a woman, less for children. The scribes write the numbers without comment, but the wedges seem pressed a little deeper, as though the stylus itself feels the weight. In the deepest chamber, accessible only to the highest officials, lie the treasures that never leave, ingots of silver coiled like sleeping snakes, lumps of raw lapis wrapped in soft cloth, strands of carnelian beads that glow like embers when held to lamplight. These are the gifts of kings, the dowries of princesses married to distant allies, the offerings of merchants who pray for safe caravans. They rest in cedar boxes lined with linen, cool and untouched, waiting for a festival that may never come. Let the quiet of the storehouse settle over you now, like dust settling on sealed jars. Listen to the almost inaudible creak of wood expanding in the heat, the soft rustle of palm rats in the rafters, the slow breathing of the building itself. Everything here is measured, recorded, owed. The entire city lives within the rhythm of these rooms: birth, marriage, death, festival, famine, all of it written in neat columns of wedges and stored in cool darkness. And when the last jar has been sealed, and the final weight has been returned to its place beside the scale, we move softly onward, toward the scent of bitter herbs and the low murmur of incantations. For even in this world of careful accounting, illness and demons still found their way through the cracks. Mesopotamian medicine, demons, herbs, and clay tablets let the heavy door of the storehouse swing shut behind us with the softest of thuds, sealing away the golden dust of barley and the faint sweetness of sesame. The corridor we now follow is narrower, cooler, and scented differently: sharp green, almost biting, crushed coriander, dried mint, the smoky breath of juniper berries burning in a clay bowl. Somewhere ahead, water drips steadily into a stone basin. Plop, 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 a sound as regular and comforting as a slow heartbeat. We are inside the house of the Psipu, the exorcist healer, whose courtyard lies tucked behind the temple precinct like a quiet afterthought. The walls here are washed with pale gypsum, and simple line drawings in red ochre show protective spirits tall, winged figures with eagle heads standing guard. A single oil lamp burns on a low clay stand, its flame steady, throwing long shadows that sway when anyone moves. The healer himself sits cross-legged on a reed mat, an older man with a neatly trimmed beard going gray at the edges. His eyes are calm, almost sleepy, but they miss nothing. Before him lies a sick child, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wrapped in a soft wool blanket. Despite the warmth, the child's breathing is shallow and quick. A fever has settled in the limbs like hot lead. The mother kneels nearby, silent, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles are white. Watch how gently everything proceeds. There is no hurry, no raised voices. The Psipu first places the palm of his hand on the child's forehead, cool skin against hot, then moves it slowly to the chest, the belly, the soles of the feet. He is feeling for the presence of something that has no weight yet presses all the same: a demon, a ghost, an angry god's gaze, the invisible residue of someone's envy. His lips move almost imperceptibly, reciting under his breath the ancient names of protective spirits. Next he lifts a small clay bowl, filled with clear water drawn before sunrise from the river's purest flow. Into it he drops 7 tiny pebbles collected from 7 different canals, 7 being the number that aunties knots in the spirit world. He stirs the water with a tamarisk twig, murmuring all the while, Then he sprinkles a few drops across the child's forehead, letting them run down the temples like cool tears. From a row of shelves along the wall, he selects small bundles tied with red thread. Dried asafoetida whose smell is fierce and sulphurous, cassia bark curled like tiny scrolls. Dried pomegranate rind that rattles softly. These he crushes between two stones. The sound is slow, rhythmic grinding that fills the room. Powder is mixed with warm barley beer and a little fat from a pure white sheep. Fat carries the medicine deep into the body. Beer carries away the illness. The mixture is thick, dark, and smells strongly of earth and smoke. The child drinks it without protest, trusting the familiar voice of the healer. While the herbs begin their quiet work inside, the Psipu turns to the second part of his craft. He takes a fresh lump of clay soft from the river and begins pressing cuneiform signs into it with a steady hand. This is the incantation tablet, written only for this one illness, this one child, this one night. The words are old, older than the city itself. You who have entered through the wind, who have slipped between the bricks of the wall, who have hidden in the shadow of the roof beam, I know your name. Bind you with 7 knots of red wool. I drive you out with 7 pebbles from 7 canals. I send you back to the step where no man walks. Let the child sleep. Let the child rise cool tomorrow. When the tablet is finished, he bakes it quickly in a small brazier of glowing charcoal, the heat rising in gentle waves. Once it is hard, he ties it with a linen thread and hangs it around the child's neck like an amulet. The weight is slight, but the words inside are heavy with centuries of use. Now comes the waiting. The mother rocks almost imperceptibly. The healer burns a little juniper resin. The smoke curls upward in a thin, steady ribbon, carrying the illness with it. Outside, the night deepens. A dog barks once far away and is silent. The child's breathing slows, deepens. The fever, like a tide that has reached its highest point, begins to ebb. Not every case ends so quietly. Some demons are stubborn, some ghosts cling to the living with cold fingers. Then the rituals grow longer. A substitute figurine of dough and clay is made in the sick person's likeness, dressed in tiny clothes, fed 7 mouthfuls of good food, and finally buried at a crossroads so the demon follows it instead. Sometimes a piglet is brought black if possible, washed 7 times, anointed with oil, and led around the bed while the healer recites. When the animal shivers, it has taken the illness into itself. It is killed quickly, its entrails examined for omens, its body buried far from the city. But tonight the air feels lighter, the lamp flame straightens, the mother's hands unclench. The healer allows himself the smallest of nods, the Mesopotamian equivalent of a smile. He will stay until dawn, dozing upright against the wall, ready to repeat any part of the ritual if the fever tries to return. Let the scent of juniper and warm beer settle over you now, gentle and familiar. Let the slow drip of water into the basin become the rhythm of your own breath. Illness came suddenly in that world, and recovery, when it came, was never taken for granted. Every cool forehead in the morning was a small, quiet victory over the unseen. And when the first pale light touches the courtyard wall, when the child sleeps deeply and evenly at last, we step softly away from the healer's house, past the sleeping lions painted on the wall, toward the distant sound of bronze striking bronze, the measured beat of weapons being prepared, the patient heartbeat of a world that always needed defending. Warriors of the city-states, spears, shields, and sieges let the scent of juniper fade behind us now, replaced by something drier, more metallic, the faint tang of bronze left too long in the sun, the dusty warmth of leather, the ghost of sweat baked into wool padding. The healer's quiet courtyard is dissolved, and we stand instead on a low rise just outside the walls of ancient Lagash, perhaps around 2400 BCE. Dawn is still only a pale promise along the eastern horizon, yet already the plain is stirring. Listen! From the city gate comes the soft, rhythmic clatter of equipment being checked one last time, the muted thud of a spear but set upright, the creak of a wicker shield flexed to test its bindings, the low murmur of men who have done this many times before and hope to do it many more. They move without hurry. There is no trumpet blast, no drum roll. Mesopotamian armies woke early and walked quietly, the way farmers walk to the fields. Imagine them forming up in the half-light, 600 men, perhaps 800, drawn from the households of Lagash and its surrounding villages. Most were only a knee-length kilt of coarse wool and a leather cap reinforced with bronze studs. Their skin is already darkened by years of sun. Scars from earlier campaigns show pale against it. Each man carries a bronze-headed spear about as long as he is tall, its ashwood shaft worn smooth by countless palms. Across the left arm hangs a rectangular shield of wicker covered in ox hide, light enough to carry all day, strong enough to turn an arrow or a thrown stone. A short sickle sword or heavy copper axe hangs from a belt, weapons kept more for the clothes, messy work after the spear lines break. At the front stand the professionals, the king's own guard in padded leather cloaks, sewn with bronze scales that flash dully when they move. Their helmets are taller, fitted with cheek guards, and a horsehair crest-dyed crimson. They carry longer spears and heavier shields faced with thin, sheet bronze. Behind them rolled the supply wagons, slow, solid-wheeled carts drawn by onagers, loaded with spare weapons, water skins, sacks of parched barley, and the folded tents of goat hair that will shelter the army at night. The march begins without ceremony. Column stretches out along the raised causeway between irrigation canals, feet raising small puffs of dust that drift away on the morning breeze. No songs yet. Voices are saved for the evening camp. The only steady sound is the soft padding of thousands of feet and the occasional snort of the onagers. Birds rise in flocks from the reeds, wheel once overhead and settle again. By mid-morning, the enemy's city appears on the horizon, the ancient rival, its walls a dark line against the heat haze. The siege will not be swift. Mesopotamian cities were built to withstand exactly this kind of patient quarrel. The defenders have already filled the outer moat with brushwood and set it alight. Black smoke rises lazily, carrying the acrid smell of burning tamarisk. Along the battlements stand rows of archers in leather caps, their bows unhurriedly strung. Tackers settle into the slow rhythm of investment. Trenches are dug in measured stages, earth piled into low ramps. They creep forward night after night. Each dawn the defenders roll stones down the slope or loose volleys of sling stones that hum through the air like angry bees. Casualties are few but steady. A man here with a cracked skull, another there clutching an arrow in the thigh. The wounded are carried back to the camp where a barber surgeon binds the wound, with linen soaked in honey and cedar oil, muttering the same short prayer the healer used for fever. Days stretch into weeks. The sun climbs and descends with relentless patience. In the evenings the soldiers sit in small circles around dung fires, eating barley cakes baked on clay griddles, drinking warm beer from shared bowls. Someone tells the old story of Gilgamesh wrestling in Kedu on the walls of Uruk. The listeners nod, half asleep, the firelight flickering across tired faces. Night the city glows faintly from watchfires along the walls. From the plain you can hear the low voices of the defenders changing watch, the occasional cry of a baby inside the walls who does not understand why the granaries are guarded so closely now. Both sides wait. Mesopotamian warfare was less about glorious charges than about who could outlast hunger, thirst, and the slow erosion of hope. Eventually one side yields, usually the smaller city, when the canals have been cut and the last jar of water is empty. The gates open at dawn. The victors enter quietly, spears lowered but ready. There's no wild sack, no rivers of blood in the streets. The defeated king is led away barefoot, a rope of ordinary flax around his neck, to be presented to the gods of the winning city. Houses are searched methodically, grain and silver are loaded onto wagons. A few men who resisted too fiercely are killed with spear thrusts quick, almost formal. The rest are enrolled as laborers or soldiers for the victor. Life continues, only the name above the gate has changed. Years later, the same men who marched out from Lagash may march back from another campaign, older, quieter, carrying new scars and a little loot, a bronze bowl, a string of carnelian beads for wife or daughter. They stack their spears in the palace armory, hang their shields on pegs where dust will slowly settle, and walk home through streets that smell of baking bread and river mud. Children run to meet them, wives offer cool beer without questions. The war is already becoming a story told in the evening shade. Let the soft thud of marching feet slow now until it is only the gentle rhythm of your own breath. The spears lean forgotten against mud brick walls, the shields gather dust, and the plain returns to its ancient quiet. Even the longest quarrel between cities was only a ripple on the surface of deeper, slower changes written in the shifting courses of rivers and the silent language of cracked earth. And so we turn very gently toward those final, quiet currents that carried the world's first cities away, as softly as a sleeper turning over in the night. The slow collapse, climate, conflict, and the end of an age let the last marching feet fade into the dry grass, until even the echo of bronze on bronze is gone. The plain is empty now. The siege ramps have crumbled back into the soil, and the cities themselves stand quiet beneath the sky that has grown strangely pale. It is later than you think, perhaps 2000 BCE, perhaps a century after. The great age of Earth 3, the last bright flowering of Sumerian power, has already passed, and something vast and patient is withdrawing, the way a tide withdraws so slowly that you only notice when the boats are suddenly resting on mud. Stand with me on the roof of a modest house in Ur in the cool of a late summer evening. The air smells different tonight, drier, carrying a faint metallic edge, as though the wind itself has been scoured clean of moisture. The Euphrates, once so wide that to read boats could pass without touching, now threads through its bed like a tired snake, its banks cracked and white with salt. Canals that used to brim with spring flood lie baked and empty, their bottoms starred with the delicate white skeletons of fish left behind months ago. Below us, the city is still beautiful in the fading light. The great ziggurat of Nana catches the last of the sun on its upper terraces, glowing like warm honey. Lamps are being lit one by one in courtyards, and the scent of baking bread drifts upward as it always has. Yet there are fewer lamps than there were a generation ago, and many of the houses along the outer ring stand roofless, their walls already sagging back into the earth that made them. Listen carefully. The evening sounds are thinner. Fewer children shout in the alleys. Fewer donkeys bray from the stables. The temple musicians still play, but the old hymns feel slower now, as though the harpists themselves are listening for something they cannot name. Down by the harbor once crowded with boats from Dillman and Macon, only a handful of small craft rock at their moorings. The quays are half empty, their bitumen coating cracked and curling. A scribe sits on an overturned basket, tablet idle on his knee, staring at the sluggish brown water as though waiting for a shipment that will never come. The hopper is gone, the tin is gone, the lapis caravans no longer arrive. Even the barley harvest has shrunk year after year, the stalks shorter, the ears lighter, the grain itself smaller and harder to thresh. People speak quietly of the changes. Old men remember when the river ran so high in spring that it lapped at the city walls. Now children play in the old high water marks and ask why the river has moved away. The priests sacrifice more sheep, pour more beer into the sacred canals, chant longer into the night. The king sends letters carefully worded, sealed with the great royal cylinder to governors who no longer answer promptly. Texts coming late or not at all. Garrisons and distant forts melt away. Soldiers walking home with their spears across their shoulders because there is no more barley to pay them. In the north, new peoples move across the horizon, Amorites, Cushians, Elamites, their tents dark against the pale grass. They do not come in great hordes with trumpets and banners. They simply appear season after season, grazing their flocks a little closer to the canals, marrying local girls, learning the language one quiet wedding at a time. When a city's walls finally fall, it is often because the gate was opened from within by men who spoke the same tongue as the besiegers. One spring the river barely rises at all, the canals stay dry. Seed grain is eaten instead of planted. By midsummer, the storehouses are empty, and the temple issues its last measured handfuls of barley with the calm finality of a door. Closing, people leave quietly, a family here, a guild of weavers there, a potter carrying his wheel on his back. They walk north or south along the old roads looking for water that still flows, for fields that still remember rain. The city does not burn, it simply exhales, and the wind moves in. Years pass, then decades. Reeds grow tall in the abandoned harbor, jackals den in the lower terraces of the ziggurat. The wind smooths the broken mud brick until the walls look like natural hills. Scribes no longer copy the old stories. The last tablets are written in a hurried hand, recording that the palace roof has fallen in and there is no more cedar to repair it. Then even those tablets stop, yet nothing is truly lost. The silt keeps settling layer upon patient layer. The rivers shift their beds the way a sleeper shifts position, and new cities will rise on new mounds. Little to the west, Babylon, Seleucia, Baghdad, each one built unknowingly on the bones of the older ones. The hymns of Enheduanna will be copied again centuries later by Assyrian schoolboys who must pronounce the old Sumerian words. A farmer plowing a field will turn up a tiny cylinder seal, blue with lapis inlay, and hang it around his child's neck for luck without ever knowing it once belonged to a princess. The collapse was never a crash. It was a long, slow sigh, the sigh of rivers shrinking, of canals filling with sand, of people walking away because staying had become harder than leaving. Cities became villages, villages became tales, tales became the gentle undulations you see today from an airplane window over southern Uruk, soft green and brown waves that look almost like dunes but are not. Let that sigh settle over you now, soft as the finest dust. Let it carry away the names of kings, the clang of bronze, the smell of temple incense. All that remains is the plain, the sky, and the two rivers still winding southward, patient as ever, carrying their burden of silt toward the sea. And now, very gently, we will descend from the empty roof, step across the cracked threshold of a house that has forgotten its own doorway, and walk out onto the quiet plain where moonlight touches the low mounds and nothing stirs but the wind. Here we are, dear listener, at the end of our long journey through the world's first cities. The night has grown deep around you. Perhaps the blanket has warmed. Perhaps your breathing has slowed to the same unhurried rhythm as those ancient rivers. We have walked the hot alleys of her at dawn, stood beneath the patient gaze of ziggurats, listened to the quiet scratching of the very first writing, and watched the civilization exhale itself back into the earth from which it came. All of it, the palaces and the storehouses, the spears and the incantations, the love songs and the tax receipts, has settled now into a silence so complete it feels almost like listening. And in that listening you may notice something gentle. Nothing was ever truly lost. The same silt that once fed those cities still feeds the date palms today. The same stars that wheeled above Sargon's sleepless palace wheel above us tonight. The same human needs for bread, for water, for stories, for rest move through us as quietly as blood. You're here, warm and safe, while outside your window the modern night keeps its own soft watch. Let the last faint scent of river mud and warm barley drift away. Let the plain stretch out, empty and peaceful, beneath a moon that has seen every beginning and every ending and simply continues shining. Sleep now, the rivers will keep flowing, the dust will keep settling, and tomorrow is already waiting.